Seeking the wise,
with Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy,
covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Wise podcast. I am Aaron Keith, and along with me virtually is Alexander.
So good to be with you people and to connect with Aaron again. We're looking forward to going over a few new stories and seeing how we can incorporate the philosophy in with the situations that people are creating out here.
Yeah. The situations that people are getting themselves into, possibly because of lack of consciousness out there in the world, but we're here to shed a little light and try to guide some people. So, you guys out there can pull from these experiences and, hopefully go back to our earlier episodes. We do have 170 plus episodes now that you can pull from and get to work on your own self-growth. So, Alexander, am I overreacting for not buying a gift for graduation? So the original poster says, I got invited to my friend's sister's commencement and graduation party. I am also helping to set up the grad party at a restaurant with a few other friends. This wasn't really by choice. Our friend kind of coerced us. Today, my friend texted our group chat saying to be ever so kind to buy a $25 gift card for her sister. I have spoken maybe 2 words to her sister. I just thought it'd be nice to support her accomplishment of graduating nursing school. I spoke with another friend who was in the group chat. We both thought a $25 gift card was unreasonable, especially since we knew she would not return the favor at our graduation in May of 2025. I spoke with the friend over a call, and she said I was being overdramatic and rude. I know $25 isn't that big of a deal to most, but money is tight with the holidays, and I'm going off to college in August. Am I overreacting by not wanting to purchase a gift card? So this is such a small thing that could happen to somebody in everyday life.
Sure.
But it is something that could cause an emotional reaction, and something that these emotions could go on for days because, people aren't communicating right away, and there are feelings that come up in somebody that they're then afraid to express to another person because afraid of judgment or how, they would be seen. And these things just kind of turn into situations that they don't need to.
Yeah.
We can feel into our emotions and stand in our power and have a view for ourselves. But I do appreciate this person coming and wanting to know if they're overreacting. That shows a level of consciousness where you're questioning yourself. So all these stories that we share are great from that perspective because the person is taking that first step to question their own judgments.
Yeah, so that, self-awareness is one of the very first steps in working with a philosophy or a religious path or anything to better themselves. That self-awareness is so important. What most people haven't been taught is how not to judge it. So we can be self-aware and we can even question, but we don't have to be caught up in the judgment of this. Right off the bat, for our listeners, Aaron doesn't share these stories with me to know ahead of time. This is part of the fun of the way that we're approaching this, is to bring the philosophy into everyday situations from a blind eye, so to say, because this is what the daily practices is for, so that you can adapt your work into any situation in a common day, because this is a modern day philosophy for having a family, having a job, being involved in your culture, and still taking time to develop the self. So in this very first situation, one of the first things to recognize is there has been an expectation created here. And as we teach in the philosophy, as soon as an expectation is created, disappointment has to come somewhere. So see, out of all of the friends that are involved in this, she may be the only one that doesn't give the gift, which would, all the disappointment would come to her. Now, we're always interested in what to learn here and what the lesson is. So, see, this person that is reaching out in this message, to avoid this in the future, they can simply say anytime they are doing something for somebody, like she said, she's setting up for this reception or something like that. Um, she can say, in lieu of a gift, I'm willing to give my time to help this party get this going, blah, 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 blah. Can that be my gift? And see if the person then says, well, we were really hoping that everybody would still get a $25 gift. Okay, well, then I'm happy to give the $25 gift, but then I'm not going to give my time. And so this is a way to consciously communicate and get clear. But see, there's nothing that she did wrong in this particular situation because we don't know the lesson until many times we get caught in the negative aspect of the lesson. And that's why anytime the thought of would have, could have, or should have comes up, we want to merely look at it and switch that to from this point on, I'm going to handle this differently. And so to me, that's even worth, if that friend is really going to be upset, it could potentially be worth paying that $25 for the gift to appease the friend to stop the ripple. But then moving forward, they would never be put in that situation again. So, see, again, she says, and she admitted $25 may not seem like a lot, but it's during the holiday season, money is tight. So sometimes the lesson is worth whatever the financial price is. Here we're talking $25, which isn't that big of a deal. She can save strain from her relationship by giving that $25 gift card, but cementing it in her knowing that I won't be put in this situation again because if I give my time, I will communicate that's in lieu of a gift. If they really want the gift because of whatever the circumstance is, then I'm not going to give my time and I'll give this gift. But it's a wonderful story to start off with. Again, these are little things that even if it's not for somebody's birthday or graduation or whatever like that, these are the type things that people do day in and day out and get caught in.
Yeah. So I guess now that she's aware that this could be a situation with this friend group, or even a situation that happens later on in life, maybe the details, the variables change, but the expectation from other people that that you give a gift, I think everybody is kind of aware of that, and I think that's where judgment comes in, where people actually take on stress when they're going someplace because they know they have to get a gift or they will be judged
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect. And what we kind of talk about here is anytime you feel some self-judgment, it usually is judgment upon yourself, by yourself, for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think that we're going to be judged, it really is we would judge somebody else usually for not bringing a gift, and so thus we're projecting the judgment onto ourselves for potentially not doing that. So it does sound like this person is a student. So yeah, $25 may be a lot to this person
Mm-hmm.
versus like, you or I going to, a place. But one thing that would rub me the wrong way is somebody telling me that I have to do something
Sure.
because
Sure.
that makes me want to do the opposite,
Yeah.
especially since somebody's telling me. So I know that in this situation, I would find friction with this friend if
Mm-hmm.
they're telling me that I should do this, especially if I'm helping out. So how would somebody handle this? I mean, you suggested that, okay, yeah, maybe it's worth if they really value this friendship and they are putting their wellness as a priority. Maybe it's paying that $25 as that cost so that they don't need to feel that friction going forward. They don't need to spend the time to try to explain their stance. But let's say somebody like me who has both of those things where I don't want to do what somebody else tells me,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a boundary where, in my head, helping out was my gift. How could I consciously communicate that to that person obviously conscious communication takes two people, so
Mhm.
this may not work out
Okay.
great, but
Yeah.
and paying that cost may be the best chance, and then like you said, going forward, pre-communicating this stuff ahead of time
Hmm.
would be optimal. But
Yes.
let's say I'm behind the ball right now, and I'm I'm putting my foot down because I'm not just gonna roll over, because I had this idea of what I was doing, and now this is coming at me. So how could I
Yeah.
consciously communicate that?
So if we look at everything, everything has an energetic cost. And we simplify it by just saying everything has a cost. Lessons have a cost. So, see, in this situation, that's why I'm suggesting the $25 may be an easier cost than the confrontation with this friend, the explanation of it, the standing in your power. Now, that can be useful and it can be very beneficial. Taking it from like where you're saying that you might be approaching it from, because setting our boundaries and standing by those boundaries are very important. But see, communicating those boundaries ahead of time is the key here, and that's the lesson that's learned. But if the willingness is to pay the cost is, you know what, I'm just not going to pay this $25 for a gift certificate or a gift, and I'm going to go to my friend and I'm going to accept that they're going to be upset at me and they're going to have judgment. I'm not going there to try to stay out of judgment or to correct their judgment. I'm just going there to merely plead my case as to where my boundary is, to potentially consider apologizing. I could have communicated this better, and in the future, moving forward, I will be sure to do that. But this is where I'm drawing the line. And yes, that friend then may cast judgment, may pull away, may do something for days or for weeks, or sometimes it's even months, and sometimes things like this can even ruin certain relationships. But if that happens, then I happen to see that maybe that relationship wasn't based on as much as both parties thought that it was, if something this small is going to bring in that much of a ripple. So so see, there's a time to make a stand, and that's exerting willpower. And then there's time to trust that, okay, this needed to happen so that I get this lesson clearly. I'm going to make a payment for the cost of it, and it's either $25 for the lesson or the confrontation and the potential to create ripples, negative ripples for days, weeks, or months moving forward. Because, see, normally when people cast a judgment, they're not likely to change that judgment no matter what the explanation is. When somebody's in judgment, they're typically going to stay in that judgment until they're ready to see it from a different light. So, see, that's another part of the conscious communication. You can say, hey, I wanted to come to explain myself. I'm not interested in necessarily solving this issue today. I just want to speak my truth. You've already spoken your truth, that you feel like that it would be disrespectful or whatever not to do this, and everybody else in the group to do it. And so maybe we need to take some time now to take a couple of days. Let's go to the event, make the event as wonderful as it can be, and then take a few days to come back and have an adult conversation about how you view not just this, but it brings in a subject matter of a lot of things, because the main subject matter here is expectations and disappointment. Then the conversation consciously can go in a direction of, hey, are we nurturing a conscious relationship, or are we nurturing a cultural relationship? Because you're coming from a cultural view of these expectations. And listen, I'm not judging you for that, because that's what our culture taught us to do. I'm sharing a conscious view and attempting to set boundaries that I would suggest for you and anybody that I talk to, that those are good, and that we should love each other through these boundaries and through these um, limits of exhausting ourselves, whether that's financially, energetically, physically, or mentally, or spiritually. So this, I think, it really comes down to what a person values, and even to go through those five that I just mentioned and put them in order. of the physical, the mental, the emotional, the energetic, and the spiritual. And see, this falls under a physical thing because it's a physical gift. And the expectations that come with that is connected to the emotions. So so see, when these two people come together to discuss it, could be coming from very different parts of themselves, and this is what normally creates communication breakdown. Is the person that's looking to set the boundary may be coming from a mental state of, hey, I'm looking to change this pattern and stop this cultural phenomena that it seems to rule everyone. And that's more of a mental approach, to where the other person may be coming from an emotional approach, and how they're worried about this sister or friend or whoever it was being offended by not receiving this gift. So see, that mental person and that emotional person, it's not likely that anything is going to get resolved until both parties can potentially see it from all five levels, and then be able to discuss it from that level of depth. And that's what we're hoping to help with and to continue to work forward with.
Yeah, I think the idea that there's an energetic cost in any situation, and in this one, the original person could pay the cost through friction or pay the cost through the monetary gift. So I feel like that's a cool view that people probably aren't going to get out there outside of this podcast.
Yeah, and then the biggest part of that is that, see, once you pay the cost, that solidifies, oh, I'm not going to be in this position again. So, see, that's the importance of being willing to pay the cost, either energetically through the confrontation and that type of thing, or the $25. And there's been many times, whether it was $100 or 300, multiple $100 or whatever, or even $1,000 at one time, that I had some friction with somebody. I said, "Hey, take it, man. I'm not going to defend my view of this, because I'm never going to be in this situation again, because I've learned something." And normally what's learned is how to communicate better. That's the lesson that comes over and over, is conscious communication keeps you from being caught in dramatic situations. And so for me, many times I'm more than willing to pay the monetary cost of something, because energy is more valuable to me personally than monetary value. And that isn't always the way that I looked at things. But now at this stage of my life, I happen to see and feel that energy is everyone's most valued commodity. And whether that's your sick or ill that draws your energy down, or is stress from financial type of situations. See, everything seems to pull our energy down, and then that has major effects on all five of those levels. So here we're talking about, how do you get out of this situation with learning the lesson, paying the cost with the least expenditure. um, and so that's why sometimes it's worth letting the $25 go and not proving the point, and still maybe having a conscious conversation down the road. Because see, you could comply, so to say, but then say, I'm happy to do this time, but I look forward to us having a conversation so that moving forward, you or I won't be in this situation again. So see, no matter how the cost is paid, there's still a communication, ideally, that needs to happen. And so whether that's paid through the confrontation and the planning another time to get together to discuss it, or paying the $25 and then saying, hey, but can we discuss, what went down here? Because it's typically always bigger to the one seeking consciousness. It's bigger than the isolated event. But see, once again, this person that's getting offended or potentially gets offended, they're focused on just the isolated event. So this comes back to, most of the time, people's failure in communications is that they're coming from five there's five parts to come from, and they're coming from two different parts trying to communicate to each other, and they're both focused on a specific one of those five parts, and the other one's focused on another one of the five parts that's different, and that creates communication breakdowns.
Yeah, and I'm betting that if this person did buy the gift card and say, hey, can we talk about it? That because that friction isn't there and that expectation is being met, that person is more likely to listen and be
Yes.
heard.
So
Yeah.
that's what it comes down, that sometimes, see, it's better for us to set our ego to the side and go, okay, this isn't the place for me to prove this point. I'm going to go ahead, and I think I'll be more well received if I play along this time, but you better bet your bottom dollar that I won't be going through this again, because I've learned from this lesson. I'm paying the cost monetarily, and I'm going to make sure that I over communicate moving forward to make sure that I'm not putting any expectation. So see, that's the biggest key. It's not just isolated to events. It's just that when I come across somebody that I know has expectations, I want to make sure that I communicate my boundaries clearly, so I'm not the one that's going to play the role of disappointment. Somebody else can play that role. And see, this is the general case for most people that are seeking any kind of growth or consciousness, is that you're breaking the mold, so to say. So it means that you're going to disappoint people. That's going to happen. Or you wouldn't be changing and there wouldn't be any problems, because people like to put you in a box and expect you to play along nicely. If you're not going to play along nicely and go along with what other people wish or prefer, then you've got to prepare for confrontation, or hone your communication skills to where you stay outside of that confrontation, because you're almost overly communicative to the person that you know carries these expectations. See, I love the saying that one of my clients said one time. They said, well, I can do business with a crook as long as I know they're a crook. And I bring that into this world, that when you're able to see people for who they are, not who you want them to be, but who they are. When we truly accept them, then we don't have any more resistance or issues with them, because if you truly accept them for who they are, you don't put yourself in the situations to play the roles that need to be played for them to learn the lessons that they need to learn. Somebody's going to play those roles. But see, part of consciousness is being able to choose our roles in this world. And when you know that somebody has expectations, then somebody has to play the role of disappointment. And through proper communication, you can stay out of that line of fire, and then listen to them talk about somebody else that let them down through their expectations.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this free full version of the Wise podcast. Now, before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a second and say, if you are loving what you're hearing, we do have a complete conversation premium subscription option where you can get all of our back 160 plus episodes to utilize and further your self-growth journey. And you can do that by going to the wisewisepodcast.com, click on the Get Complete button at the top, and follow the instructions. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me and I will help you take care of them. But this is for these serious individuals who are ready to take that next step, ready to make their self-growth journey a priority, ready to enhance their relationships all around, ready to accept the world for how it is and no longer be torn by the duality of the external reality. Oh, I like that. So if that's you, if you want to take that next step, consider supporting us on this journey and sharing this information. Now, if you're looking for a little more Alexander and maybe a private consultation, you can reach out to him at his website, thejustphilosophy.com, or email him at alexander@thejustphilosophy.com. On his website, you will see his different offerings, a variety of relationship coaching, energetic design consultations, where we'll look at your human design chart and your destiny cards and provide a personal prescription for you. If you're in the North Carolina area, Alexander also has a variety of different sound journey events that are being posted on his website. He also is the inventor of the Vibertune sound therapy table, which 15 minutes on this vibrating table, listening to music that he composed, leaves you in a state of contentment. It feels like an energetic blanket has just laid upon you and you're back in the womb. It's a really great experience. So if you're in the North Carolina area and you want to reach out to him to even just ride the table, reach out to him at his email address. And of course, he has a variety of other tools and music that he's composed that you can get there. So, anyway, with that said, I want to get you back to the rest of this episode and thank you for working on you. All right, I think that one is good to wrap up there. So our second story, and this is one that I've really wanted to get your opinion on because I've always wondered about this and artists and how this works or the perspectives that happen here. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say on this one. Am I overreacting? My boyfriend published a love poem to his ex. My partner is a writer. He has published a few novels and writes poems as well. He was asked to contribute a poem to an art gallery for an expedition they're doing. The poem that he gave them was about his ex. He said it's not a love poem, which is technically true, but it is a very sappy, I miss us and I'm sad kind of poem. He said he wrote the poem years ago when they broke up and that it means nothing and he has no emotional attachment to the poem anymore. When they broke up, she went no contact with him and they're not in touch. I feel really hurt about it. I genuinely can't tell if I'm overreacting. I feel like, okay, if this was his only poem and he absolutely had to use it, at the bare minimum, he could have discussed it with me first and provided some comfort about it. Instead, he waited till the last minute to tell me, and when I've told him I'm upset, he said that it's just how it is to be a writer. So this is really interesting because I've often wondered how you have these musical artists or performers, people who write songs, especially about past loved ones when they're in relationships, and then they're like outperforming them years later when they're in different relationships. How do they balance that energy where, how do their partners feel about those situations? I've always wondered how those situations would be navigated in romantic relationships.
Yeah, this is a great subject. And first of all, I want to start with there's a separation between a person and what's called a muse. A muse is someone or something that inspires you and inspires your creativity. Um, and that's what way that I see this particular situation is that there was somebody that he was with that was his muse that brought this creativity out. But that doesn't mean that he still feels the same for that person as he did when he was in the relationship with him. She just played the role. We're always talking about role playing in this podcast and the philosophy. And by role playing, we mean that there's people that has to play certain roles for us to learn certain lessons and for our growth to be initiated. So in this, obviously there's insecurity that the person that is writing this that they need to look at. Now, they've expressed themselves, but in all relationships there's a trust and a respect built there. And if she chose to be outside of her emotions, then she may feel it differently when he told her that there's no feelings anymore. This is just something I wrote when I was with this person, but my art is my art. If that would have been different if see, some artists will write a poem and give it to that person and then that's what that's for. It's not to publish down the road. But if this person just has a book and they're writing and they're using people all around them for muses and then might let somebody read it or let her read it or something, but there's no sense of I'm giving this to you. See, that's a gift. That's a personal thing. But if this is hey, this is what you inspired in me today and I wanted to just share it with you. See, sharing and gifting are two different things. And this sounds like more of a sharing that yes, he created it while he was with this person. Now people aren't always truthful because hypothetically, if that girl broke up with him and he's been yearning for her all these years, and then yes, he still has feelings, that's real too. and he may have written the poem for the person instead of it being his muse. See, I don't know that. We don't know that. But his partner could have a better idea of that, of when he told her, this means nothing. It's just a piece of my writing, and I feel like it's good, and I want to share it with the world. It's not about this person. See, if she wasn't in an emotional reaction, she could actually feel whether that's truthful or not. This is where people get caught up in lies and deceit and that kind of thing, because when you're emotional, you're taking in the information through that filter. And in order to trust what somebody says, you need to optimally be neutral. And so, if she could have been like, okay, that hit a nerve, I'm going to talk to him about it, but I got to remember that this is just my expression. So I only want to express it to him after I go through my little emotional temper tantrum. But see, normally when somebody's going through the emotional temper tantrum, unfortunately, that's when they want to go address it with the person. And they're not going to see anything clearly in that exchange. It doesn't typically work out well. So, this is again why self awareness is so important, to recognize, oh, I'm offended and I'm a little threatened by that. This is my insecurity. I need to go process that insecurity before bringing up this issue with him, so that I can read and tell whether he's truthful about how he responds to me or not. So, in all of these situations that we're talking about with these threads that we're getting of real life stories that people are talking about, the key here from the Just Philosophy, one of the main keys, is to see that both parties always have something to work on. And I want you, Aaron, to hold me to that, that if it sounds like I'm talking about one person doing all the work, we want to balance that out. Because, see, here we've discussed what she could have done that got offended before expressing herself. When we support the expressing, we don't know how truthful he's being, because we're getting this through the emotional reaction of who wrote this thread. So, but there's things for both of them to learn. And moving forward, maybe he could present it to her, because more than likely he's possibly had multiple girlfriends, and maybe he has writings that he's worked on his whole life. So, see, by starting to communicate with her through the muse adjective instead of the person, you know, and that's a big lesson for him to learn in his discussing. That will help him as an artist, because it's different talking about somebody as a person and talking about somebody playing a role as a muse.
Yeah, and I think it's important that he did say that when they broke up, she went no contact.
Mm-hmm.
So he was left wondering what's going on. So I've been in situations like that where my heart has been ripped out and I've had all this energy and emotion come up, and I've written stories and songs and poems and all that. Now, I feel like there is a lack of space being created by this girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And this has led the boyfriend to kind of hide this. And that's why he didn't tell her right at the beginning, because I feel like there's a lot of judgments, or just energetically, there's not space for his creativity to be seen without being judged. Maybe that's on him. Maybe he is, judging himself for that and then projecting it onto her. Or maybe she just is not allowing him to be free in his expression. I've been in situations like this, so this one really hits home for me,
Mm-hmm.
because when we can see the human experience as we're all emoting, we've all been in relationships that have broke our hearts. We've all had emotional reactions. We've all wished to be with somebody who cut us off.
Mm-hmm.
This is, it's not just him. And then she's choosing to be upset because he had this emotion at one point for another person.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is so indicative in our culture that, oh, he shouldn't feel that way. He's wrong for feeling that way. But he's an artist, one, but I mean, you don't have to be an artist to express yourself, but I don't feel like there's room for him to have that expression in the past, for him to talk about it. Clearly he felt like he had to hide it, and of course that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have brought this up when she didn't find out because that created the emotional reaction, and then he has to backpedal, and then he has to justify why he did that. And I've been guilty of that in the past
Mm-hmm.
because I felt like I can't share this part of me because it's going to be judged, and then I have to explain. Then, because in our culture, this is seen as bad, like having songs about your past person. I mean, as a singer songwriter, like that is valid. Like everybody celebrates that, but as a person in a relationship, I feel like that is seen as some sort of emotional cheating or something. And yes, if he still has feelings and he's still pining for this person, maybe there is something to that. But it sounds like it was over a couple years ago, at
Mm-hmm.
least.
And to go to your point, like, so what the musician or the person in his situation can do that I have found personally in my own experience, because I've failed at this as well early in my career, and how it is now is that it helps with the emotional blow of the person that's receiving the story when you're able to be vulnerable, first of all, to share where you're hurt, how you expressed it, what happened, but then if you're able to express what you learned from that situation, and when you show what you've learned, see, it takes the pressure off the receiver to be concerned about you going back to that energy. Because typically when you talk about what you learned, you show, oh, I'm no longer interested in that lesson or that person. Because yeah, she broke my heart, but like I went through a huge breakup, I don't know, it's almost 10 years ago now. And what that taught me was about trust. And this person broke my heart around trust. But see, that taught me that I should learn to put my trust in my life and the divine. And if you do that and you practice that daily, you don't have to worry about your trust in other people. They're just playing roles. So so I think that's a big key for the artist, the person that's sharing past pieces of art or past muses. That's a big key, is being able to share what you learned from the situation. And this part that I just discussed for me is one of my top 3 lessons in my life. So, see, when I talk to somebody presently about that relationship, I don't feel like they get any idea that I still want to be with that person, or that I would revert back to where they are or where we were, because everybody around me learns that the lesson is one of the most important parts of this experience. So the more that we can talk about what was learned rather than what was experienced or who the experience was with or what activated it, I think that helps the receiver to work through their insecurities a little bit better. But that's a key. And this is why I feel like we should practice every day at the end of the day, just simply contemplating on what we learned that day. And there should be something learned every single day, something substantial. And whether that's a communication issue, an energetic, a physical, whatever it is. And a lot of people just don't think to do practices like that, but it helps the communicator to learn how to communicate. The more that you focus on what you're learning and what you've learned from the past. Because, see, maybe this come up hypothetically in this situation because he hasn't learned anything from the situation, and maybe he still does pine for, and this opportunity to send in this piece of poetry has re-stimulated that. See, that's a possibility as well. But because that X won't have anything to do with him, that's the only reason that he's writing it off, saying that, oh, it's just this old piece of art. Because, see, again, he's not explaining what he learned in any of that. So, how is his present partner supposed to just know that he no longer has feelings or anything like that? That's where trust is so important, and why being emotionally neutral is invaluable to know whether you can trust a person in that situation. Because, see, when I was talking about my personal situation 10 years ago, I knew through my gut, my knowing. I went to this person 3 different times and asked them, and they lied to me straight into my face, looking me in my eyes. And I loved this person. They loved me. I know that was there. But they were so afraid of confrontation that they just lied to me, and my knowing knew that. So, see, that was part of my lesson when they left, is that I happened to put more trust into this human being than the trust in my own divine connection. And that was the lesson in that experience for me. No moss, brothers and sisters. Moving forward, no human will come between me and my knowing and my connection to that divine. We're always getting messages, but our preferences get in the way of us seeing those messages clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I've done this same thing where, like I mentioned, I went through a really bad heartbreak when I was in my early 20s, and I wrote a song, and I recorded that song, and I still have that song, and I like to revisit it every so often because I have a lot of, and I'm just saying this because I feel like this is how or why I connect with it, but I have a lot of like Scorpio energy, Cancer energy even, and we like to feel into our emotions deeply. And so when I hear that song, I can feel deeply into my emotions, but it's not attached to that person. It's
Mm-hmm.
attached to that thing I went through
The
and
experience, yeah.
revisiting that emotion to see where I am now, and I get like more information out of that song, and I can even get lost in that song and lost in that energy, but it's still like not connected to that person. I don't pine for that person.
Yes.
It was that experience that I had, that trauma. And maybe it is a little bit of trauma that I'm tapping back into.
So, see, every time that you gain something new, that can be shared, or and so
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah. You're
sharing
right.
of the learning and what the lesson was. Yeah.
Yeah, and I brought that up because I wanted to just say that we often judge people how we are internally, and people are all different how we interact with emotions. Like artists are usually very in touch with their emotions, and it creates energy that has to escape, and that's how they create. And so to somebody who's not like that and they're dating an artist, that is going to be a
An
little weird to
obstacle.
them
Yeah.
because they can't really understand why a person would have that. So
So,
I just wanted to bring up those differences.
yes, and that's beautiful, because, so, see, here we're talking about that this person obviously has insecurity issues, so they need someone to play a role for them to work on their insecurity. So this is why that they started dating a musician or an artist or whatever that's going to get attention, that's going to have emotional connections to people in their past, that's created pieces of art connected to that, because that's a beautiful working breeding ground for self-development work around insecurity and around, see, there's the possibility for her to just trust her partner. And if her partner goes, hey, there's no connection intimately there anymore, it's just the muse and the lesson. And I can still go back and learn from this, but I'm going to share with you every time I learn something deeper about it. I'm going to share that with you, because that's the important thing here, is the experience and then what is learned from it, not who initiated the muse, going back to the muse, being the muse for me to have this expression. And again, I find that the huge part that helps that is to say, for example, let me share 5 things that I learned from this breakup that I no longer participate in. And you're getting a better version of me because of these lessons that I learned. Now, if the person can't give lessons that they've learned, see, they more than likely may be stuck in pining energy or detachment energy. And see, that's going to be able to be felt. And and by detachment, what I mean is sometimes people will just not address the situation or the person because they've been cut off until something like this opportunity to share this piece of art comes up to bring them back into that. This is why emotional processing as soon as possible is so important. But this also comes down to the agreement that two conscious people working on a conscious relationship, need to have, that they're going to make sure that when they discuss the situation, that they're not emotional. And if they start to get emotional, they're going to ask for a timeout or a reschedule. And this becomes those two people are really interested in working toward solidifying clarity together rather than who's right and who's wrong. See, again, here we get back into being the investigators rather than the judges. And when two judges go to a meeting, they're busy trying to prove their point. I mean, this is what lawyers do. They're busy proving their point, and in court, see, neither one of the lawyers are interested in what the other lawyer is saying. They're not trying to see it their way. And this is the way most people approach relationships, is the way that lawyers approach their job. And I'm suggesting that both parties need to show up as an investigator. And normally that means, tell me what you're learning. Tell me how that affected you and changed you in your life. And seeing if it didn't change and you don't have anything that you learned from it, then there's probably still pining going on or lack of healing that's connected to it. So I think this is a wonderful example to bring up, because even outside of artists, it could be somebody that has a public job that gets a lot of just attention. So, the role that they play in front of people like that, they run for political parties or something like that, their spouses have to deal with all that attention. So I feel that you want to be busy building your faith and your trust, not just in each other, but in your lifestyle. And that if both parties stay faithful to that lifestyle, then the people that are involved and come and go, they're not as significant. But when they're not in agreement with their lifestyle, then these emotional reactions and are going to come up, and normally poor communication is going to happen. And what normally happens is somebody has to sacrifice something. Either the artist has to sacrifice sharing that piece of art, or and seeing that creates intimacy issues. So then it becomes, well, I can't share anything that I come across because she's going to ask who I was with at that time and who this was about. So see, this is why it's so important to use this muse adjective and say, this is just someone that played a role to elicit this creativity in me. It's not connected to them as a person. My art is never connected to a person as a person, or I give that piece of artwork to them. And I've done that multiple times in my life. I create a piece of art, I put it in a frame, and I give it to them. Then from that point on, I'm not using that art in my world anymore. It was a gift. So I think there's a few separations that are important here, again, on both sides here.
Yeah, and let's just dig into that a little bit more before we wrap this up, because you kind of mentioned what I wanted to talk about, where somebody may be attracted to an artist type because they see like vulnerability and they want vulnerability in a relationship. But if they don't give room and freedom to that person to give back that vulnerability in the relationship to that person, then they're not going to get what they want. And again, like, this is something that that's happened in my past relationships, where I didn't feel as free or that I could be as vulnerable as I wanted to. And so I would like not talk about certain things, and that can be seen as hiding or lying, with omission.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't feel like that I could express myself in a way that would not be judged immediately. Like, I didn't have trust that I was going to be given the benefit of the doubt to be able to explain myself and then be seen for, for my vulnerability, be seen in the way that I experienced it, and it would be judged, and then I'd have to. So at some point, it's like it's not worth even bringing up,
Yeah.
and it hurts me because I'm cutting myself off. I want to be a vulnerable person. I mean, I am with myself, but I wanna be myself around somebody. But when I don't feel safe, when that space isn't being created, then they're not going to get that side of me.
Yeah.
And I know, like, this is a conscious thing too, where I need to be more conscious in explaining and bringing that up, so that it never gets to that situation.
Right. Well said, because
But
that's the lesson.
but as I'm going through this stuff, it was already set up, and then I realized it, and then it's hard to fix after that.
Yeah, because see, sometimes this is where we have to accept that who somebody really is and whether they're going to be able to adapt and let this view go, or it becomes the artist's responsibility to now everybody that they meet, whether they're romantically interested or not, this becomes part of their language of, oh, I've written poems and music throughout my life, and many different people have played the role of muse, some romantic, some friendship, some workmates, but none of my art is connected to them personally. I'm just they were just part of the creative process. And so, see, the more we start a connection in that type of language, then when we bring it up, see, it's a reminder. But when you're already connected to somebody and you start trying to bring this type of stuff in, see, if they're not on the same page with you and see the benefit of it, then it starts to feel like you're covering something up. And so, this is revealing that there's trust issues here, which normally means that they're bringing those trust issues in from past experiences. And that's not likely to be like overcome, you know, unless both parties really work together. And so, trust in the philosophy we discussed that trust should be earned, respect should be given. And too often, trust is given. And then a situation happens that creates an emotional reaction, and that trust gets taken away. And then there's almost nothing that that person can do to rebuild that trust. And so this is why sometimes some of our experiences are just for that, just for a season to learn a lesson. And now it's time to move on. And moving on, I'm going to make sure that I don't fall into this routine again. And this is how I'm going to do it. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to discuss the difference between muse and people and how important my art is, and this vulnerability to be able to talk about my past and past creations or creativity. Because I agree, that certainly doesn't feel good when you have to start to tell a story and then you have to stop because now you're concerned about how this person is going to react. When you're not carrying any of those feelings, it was something that you wanted to have an intimate experience with them, but it gets turned around. And see, that's where we need to see that the emotional maturity or the trauma response that they have around trust and around these communication, sometimes it can be overcome. I've had great experience with that in partnerships, and sometimes they can't be overcome. And that is the case for a lot of nines in the cards that we work with. They're here to learn endings. And so many times they will go through these types of issues over and over and over with the same person, trying to fix that person. And they're really just with that person to learn some lessons and then move on to more conscious relationships and learning to communicate more ideal from the beginning, because it is more challenging to try to back up and play damage control, because trust is a very, very tricky thing for most people out there, because most people have issues with their parents, which it normally starts with, or with unconscious relationships in the beginning of their teens or ending of the teens and 20s and that type of thing that can really, scar a person. And it, it can break my heart to see two people that could fit together so well, but their damage from their past is what is keeping that from connecting in that intimacy to be able to be there. So that's why sometimes it's just um, counting your blessings, learning your lessons, and then knowing that, see, time can take care of a lot of our issues. So if we're struggling with somebody, sometimes, yeah, that can mean that, like, in 5 years, if we separate now and you're clear in how I see it and I'm clear in how you see it, then see, time could take those two people apart. They could both learn lessons that they need to learn. One learns communication, one works on their insecurities. Then they meet back up in 3 to 5 years and they're two different people, and they have a chance for success. But if they stay together, see, they can just tear each other apart And so this is why, separation, I'm a fan of separation where it's for a small limited amount of time or extended periods of time, because sometimes we get in the way of our partner's growth because we're too busy playing a role that they won't find somebody else to play that role for them. So we get stuck in playing a role. And that's going to keep us from being able to be vulnerable and to create consciousness, with that person. When in the intimate relationship, you're playing roles for each other. See, the goal is that you find a way to work on all or most of your issues outside of the intimate relationship. That's the key. If you try to
Yeah,
work on all
yeah,
that stuff with the intimate relationship, you're working with a very, very dangerous energy.
yeah. I was just gonna say that I feel like nowadays it's common for a lot of people to not have a social circle. A lot of introverts at least, and COVID made it easy for that
Yeah.
because you were just at home, and so and with being able to be in contact with all these people, just over the internet, there's not a lot of outside external,
Stimulation.
meetings going on, or at least not as much. So that is going to put pressure if you guys live together, with your significant other and you don't have a social circle, it's going to put all the pressure onto them.
Yes, yes, and it's very unfortunate because I've seen many, many partners that love each other, and I can see it, but they just can't work together because they're stuck in playing roles for each other, and they're not able to find a way to find somebody else to play those roles. But I've proven through my tenure that you can find someone else to play those roles for just about every issue that somebody carries, except maybe a sexual issue that that one person may have or both parties may have. I'm not suggesting that you go out there and get other sexual partners to work out these issues, but that's where counseling or some type of therapy, may be able to be helpful. So a big part here is when we talk about role play, a big opportunity for that is by having some type of coach, counselor, or mentor is what I like to suggest. Somebody that is practicing the things that they're actually teaching. And so, see, sometimes that third party can help you see it from a different view that your partner can't get through to you because you're too busy being defensive and in resistance to them and trying to prove your point. And so that's why the third party conversation can be very useful. And I do this quite a bit in my relationship consulting. And, many times when people want to talk to me about the relationship, I think it's because of Western society, how it's been developed, but they want to come see me as a couple. And I typically almost always suggest, no, I want to see both parties individually first. And then we will see each other as the couple, because I need to hear both parties' side of the story without the other one being there, because you can't always, both parties aren't always completely open and honest when the other person is there. So, see, if I can do it in 3 sessions, one with each person, get their unrestricted truth, so to say, then when I see them together, I get to see what they're covering up. I get to see what they're scared to express because I already know. They've already shared it with me. So, this is why, some of the Western view of marriage counseling or relationship counseling, I just come from a different approach. And, and finding somebody that you can just speak your truth to and don't have to hold back is a very important part of emotional processing. Again, it's not about being right or wrong, it's being the investigator and how can I assist this moving forward.
Yeah, and we've even talked about sometimes when you have other people to play those roles outside of your relationship, it can actually strengthen your relationship because then you're going to bring those problems back and your partner can help you to see how to handle them. So then it's like you're working together versus the outside world.
Yes, and that puts you on a team rather than pitted against each other. And this is conscious communication and where relationships can grow exponentially because you're playing the role of the helper or to help to see it clearly rather than trying to prove your point and the opposition. So, see, the opposition is hardly ever able to be the helper. And in this is something that you may be able to discuss with your partner that's an issue in your relationship, but she's having it with a friend or a coworker, and it's a communication issue. So then you can actually play a different role, get received, and then create more intimacy. But if somebody else don't play that role, typically we're going to be stuck, and that's what most relationships are. Is they're busy playing so many roles for each other that they just stop the intimacy, they stop the connection, and it just becomes a survival thing. And that's very uncomfortable and unfortunate, but that's the plight of a lot of relationships in our culture.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, that was fun. I'm glad we were able to talk about that one.
Yes.
That's been one that I didn't realize was stewing in the back of my mind, always wondering what you would say about that artist. And
Yeah, it's a big
because I mean,
deal.
you were one.
Yeah.
You were one as well,
Or am
being in your
one.
band, in the band scene.
Am one currently.
Yeah, you are one. You were one. You are
I
one.
were, am. And so, yeah, so as I've gotten older, I've learned these obstacles and I've learned how to communicate them more optimally. And, in my 20s and early 30s, I wasn't so good at that. I was more defensive. I didn't really want to give them the time of day to even explain because I was so career oriented and driven at that time. And that took me a long time, over 10 years, to work out of living my life in that driven way and to learn to allow people in and to create the intimacy that fortunately I've been able to create in my past and in my present.
Well, that will do it for this episode. I had a lot of fun, Alexander. I hope you did too.
Yes, great topics. I love
Yeah.
the energy that comes with this because it helps with us not discussing it beforehand. And so this is the Just Philosophy and the Wise Raw, so to say.
Yeah, and so this is our third episode doing this. So, in some time we'll see if people are enjoying this or not. And if not, maybe we'll make some changes. But we're enjoying it, and hopefully you guys are too.
And if you're looking for somebody to play that third role, please reach
There you
out to book a session at the Alexander at the Just Philosophy is my email, or just visit the website. And I love working with people with this stuff. Great conversation, Aaron.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Much love.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.